Hello, YouTube. It's your boy Todd Shin and data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. What are we talking about today? The homie Ice Cube. This Ice Cube interview with Tucker Carlson is it's the bee's knees. Everyone's talking about it, so I figured I'd jump in and give you my 2 cents on it. Now, this Tucker Carlson interview is really, really interesting because I understand why Tucker Carlson wants to do this. And this is obviously something that probably he would not have gotten an opportunity to do had he still been with Fox News. So I'm glad that Tucker got out of that prison, because this is a conversation that all of us, I think, wanted to see and needed to see. Tucker, however, I understand. I want to say this. I understand why he didn't, but there's a couple questions, or at least one question, that he didn't ask Ice Cube that I thought he probably should have. Or at least it would have been warranted. I understand why Tucker was not trying to push the envelope too much, but really trying to build bridges. And I thought that in this particular context, given this is an opportunity to cross over and to reach a broader audience, I understand why he didn't ask the question. But we are going to get into why Tucker didn't ask him about this. But first, let us understand the pretext of this interview. Essentially, Ice Cube has become persona non grata amongst lefties, right? He's an outcast. Some may even want to revoke his black card or whatever. Mr. NWA himself, Negroes with attitudes and not Negroes, right? You know what the word is. This is why I think Tucker Carlson wanted to reach out to him, because I think Ice Cube is unfairly maligned. And I think that Tucker did a good job of presenting Ice Cube as a person who has been unfairly maligned, because I think that's an accurate way to put it. But let's recap first how we got here. So first thing is that Ice Cube kind of fell out of sorts with the left when he decided he wanted to work with Donald Trump on his contract with Black America initiative. And this interview with Chris Cuomo kind of underscores that. So let's take a quick listen.
Well, I didn't say you ran to anybody. I said that you had taken a pivot.
Well, you said I ran over to the Trump team instead of the Biden team. That's just not true.
But you are working with the Trump team instead of the Biden team, and people are giving you heat for it. What do you say to them?
Well, I'm willing to work with both teams, but I'm just working with whoever is willing to work with me. So the Trump campaign came to me and asked me to explain to them some of the contract with Black America. That's what I did. I'm not playing no more of these games, these political games. We're not part of a team. We have very broad problems, especially the wealth gap in this country when it comes to Black Americans. So I'm going to whoever's in power, and I'm going to speak to them about our problems specifically. I'm not going there talking about minorities. I'm not going there talking about people of color or diversity or none of that stuff. I'm going there for Black Americans, the ones who are the descendants of slaves.
All right, so you see, Ice Cube obviously has an initiative, it's contract with Black America, and the whole objective was that he would try to secure capital for Black people to start businesses, and maybe it was broader than that, but I think generally speaking, that was the objective. And although I am not a big fan of the singling out Black people, because I think that we have to get to a point where we understand that the way to help Black people is the same way to help all people. It's not a different thing, but that's beside the point. I think generally speaking, he had I think at least a noble objective, right? So the first thing he came under fire for was that he was working with the Trump administration, right? Supposedly, right? He's on Team Trump. Although his objective, I think, was reasonable, where he said, listen, I'm just trying to work with whoever will work with me. I have to say, there's a reason why I think people were a little sideways about Mr. O'Shea Jackson, aka Ice Cube, because many of you may remember that he wrote this song called Arrest the President, where his Trump derangement syndrome was on full display. I'll play just a little bit of the lyrics for you, just the lyrics alone, and we'll take a quick listen.
Arrest the president. You got the evidence. That nigga is Russian intelligence. When it rains, it pours. Did you know the new white was orange? Boy.
All right. I don't want to play too much of that because I don't want to get a copyright strike. But you see here, essentially, he is doing his Trump derangement syndrome thing. He's saying arrest the president, to the president's Russian agent. And you have to ask yourself, okay, if you felt that strongly about the president, then Donald Trump, if you felt that strongly about it, then why would you then partner with him in any way? Why would you trust him? And actually, Chris Cuomo actually raises that very point here. We'll take a look at that.
So let's look at it this way. I think that you're right to be skeptical. Let's start with the Democrats, because even though there is a traditional connection between black voters and the Democrats, you could also say you've been let down or forgotten by Democrats in a lot of situations that would have mattered. Then you say, all right, so then what makes one side better than the other? That's where you get in trouble, which is, do you really think that Donald Trump can be trusted as much as you could trust Joe Biden?
I don't think I'm not trusting any of them. I'm just going by action. That's all I'm going by. I'm not going by words. I'm not going by rhetoric, not going by media spin, not going by none of that. You know, I'm not on nobody's team. I'm not on team blue, not on team red.
So then,
all right. So you hear his response to Cuomo, and I got to be honest with you. Cuomo was right to think that's kind of suspect. I'm not saying that people were right for attacking him for wanting to work with the Trump administration, but I think at least in part, I think it's important to remember that Ice Cube brought some of this heat on himself because he took such a strong anti-Trump stance. He said the guy was a Russian agent. I mean, no matter what his objective was, I think people were right to question, well, if you felt that strongly about it, then why are you turning the page? Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, the next thing was, of course, not only did he not properly demonstrate his Trump derangement syndrome and seem to have apostatized from the Trump resistance, but he also violated the principles of the Branch Covidians, right? And he failed to give proper obeisance to the gods of COVID-19 by putting a certain experimental vaccine on the doorpost in hopes that the COVID-19 wrath would pass over him. So let's look at this, because he gets into this with the Tucker Carlson interview. Let's have a listen to that.
Have you been pulled aside by people who are trying to control you?
What they usually do is go talk to people that's in my circle. Yeah. And try to get them to try to convince them that they need to convince me that I need to take a different position. So that's kind of how I get.
On what topics?
It's been on, the vaccine.
The Hollywood Reporter says actor Ice Cube is saying no to a $9 million payday because he won't say yes to the COVID vaccine. The actor and rapper was set to co-star in a new comedy, Oh Hell No, alongside Jack Black. But when producers requested all cast members get a COVID vaccine, Ice Cube backed out.
Why wouldn't you take the vax? You had a direct order to take it. You were told to take it.
Yeah, I'm not real good with direct orders, but on a whole nother note,
but it was a command.
They
told you. They couldn't have been clearer about it.
Yeah, it was pretty clear. Did you take it?
Of course not.
Yeah, no, it wasn't ready. It was 6 month, kind of rush job. And I didn't feel safe.
Okay, so you see what Cube had to say about that. So we've basically exposed why Ice Cube became persona non grata amongst people in the left, and people try to revoke his black card and say, oh, you don't hate Trump enough, your Trump derangement syndrome is not being expressed enough, and the obeisance to the gods of COVID-19 is not sufficient. You have not made the proper sacrifice by offering yourself up on the altars of an experimental medicine. So this is how we got to where we are. Now, the thing that I want to say is this is the thing that this is the thing that I think no one's focusing on. I think Tucker would have been well within his rights to ask him about the first issue, which was his anti-Trumpism, even though if his objective was to, in fact, help black people obtain capital to start businesses, and that would, in principle, help black people and would have been a good thing, then why does it matter where the money's coming from? The money would spend all the same, whether it came from Trump or whether it came from Biden. So it would have been unreasonable for him to turn down resources that would actually help his objectives. However, He kind of brought that on himself just a little bit, at least that piece of it. But the COVID stuff, now that was obviously completely out of bounds. And what he said in this interview was completely reasonable. This is what I've been saying and why I talked about this yesterday in my video, This Is Why We Don't Trust the Science. You can watch that. I'll put a little end card here for you to go watch it if you like. But this is why we don't, quote, trust the science, because we've already seen how many times people have falsified data, have made false claims. And also, this is something that people don't seem to understand. Okay, if they could have done it in 6 months or 9 months or however long they did it, if they can do it that fast, and they haven't been doing it that fast in the past, then that means that for years and years and years and years, while these drugs set in clinical trials and going through all of this red tape from the FDA, they have been needlessly letting people die for no reason by delaying a drug that was completely ready, some orders of magnitude, a tenth of the time that would have taken them to get it out to the market. They were just delaying it for no reason. Either that's true, or there's a reason why they normally develop these drugs in 5, 6, 7, 10 years. This is the reason why I say it's irrational, and that's why we compare it to some religious devotion. Because that is a perfectly reasonable position to take. It's not anti-vaccine. It's not anti-vax. I have never told anyone not to take the vaccine. I have said, well, at least no one outside of my family. And even right now, I'm afraid to say what I'm saying right now because I feel like the COVID overlords are going to come in and say, "Oh, this is not advertiser friendly because you spoke ill of the gods of COVID-19. You've blasphemed," or something like that. I'm not saying that someone shouldn't take it. I think that particularly for older people and people with other types of comorbidities, I think that it made sense because for them, the calculus is very different. They had different risk profiles than many of us who are young and healthy. And that made perfect sense. But for those of us who did not have comorbidities and didn't have the sort of risk profile, I thought it was perfectly reasonable to say, that's a little bit too much risk for me. I don't think that I'm getting the appropriate benefit given the risk that I'm taking, and so I'm going to pass. From the perspective of Ice Cube and maybe the people who used to look up to him or used to look at him as an aspirational figure, his reputation has been damaged because he has taken perfectly reasonable positions. And this is this is my main takeaway from this, is that in the black community, there is no greater vitriol than people will face than to appear to have, quote unquote, betrayed black people by daring to think differently. And the thing about it is the positions that he was taking were explicitly from his own lips, explicitly to help black people. He even said it in his interview with Chris Cuomo. He says, "I'm not coming to help people of color. I want to help black people." He's like, "I don't know. I don't want you to include Asians and Indian Asians and Mexicans and Hispanics. I don't want you to include them in my initiative. This is about black people." For him, that's what it was about. And so it's ironic that black people turned on him because he tried to help them. And herein lies the problem with slavish thinking, right? I think it was also underscored when Vivek Ramaswamy went on to the Breakfast Club, because I think in a lot of ways, the black community is ignorant to what the real solutions are, what are the things that are actually going to help black people take that next step. They think it's government, government, government. And what Ice Cube was trying to show as a person who has been successful in the business realm is that it's not about government handouts. It's about starting businesses. It's about commerce. It's about innovation. It's about being profitable in the marketplace. And he tried to bring that aspect to the black community. And it was underscored in the interview that Vivek Ramaswamy did on the Breakfast Club, because here he was, a person who started a multi-billion-dollar business, who's a multi-millionaire, wildly successful in the commercials field, and he's getting reamed and attacked by some black girl that thinks that stuff doesn't matter, right? The ignorance, the fact that she wasn't completely destroyed for that perverse and ignorant display, it tells me all I need to know about the state of the black community because we don't even have a good grasp of what it means to make progress. We have been indoctrinated by the left, to be quite frank, that the only hope for black people is the government. And that's why I don't even know her name, and I don't care to know her name on The Breakfast Club. That's why she sounded so absurd and ridiculous, because she was just like, well, did you serve? What else have you done? I know what you did in the private sector, but that doesn't matter. No, in many ways, that's all that matters. Look at Asian Americans in this country, of which Vivek Ramaswamy is one. All they do is come here, keep their head down, and figure out skills that we need, and all they're doing all day long is raking in the dough, winning. That's all they're doing. They don't focus on politics. It is not their concern. And they have the highest income, and every socioeconomic metric that you can offer, Asian Americans are on the top. They make more money than white people. They're highly educated. They're more educated than white people. They have lower divorce rates. They have lower crime rates. They are winning in every aspect. And the last thing they're worried about is politics. And this is the tragedy of the Ice Cube situation, because he was hated for trying to do something that was actually going to help people, even though I thought that his method and the way he pursued that was going to be not really the most efficient way to do that. But I have to give respect to what he was trying to do. So the Ice Cube situation and his interview with Tucker Carlson, I thought was eye-opening. I really appreciated that Tucker, from a cultural standpoint, was looking to bridge the gap. And really, I think he did himself a service by basically presenting himself to an audience of people who, even if they didn't like Tucker, people who would be fans of Ice Cube got a chance to see Tucker and who he really was and who he really is. And I think that sort of cultural bridging of the gap is important. Those conversations are important for our culture. Well, let me know what you think, friends. Do you think Tucker should have asked him about his previous, anti-Trump position, or do you think he played it correctly? Do you think this was a good conversation? I'd like to know in the comments. If you agree with me, let me know. If you don't agree with me, I'd like to know about that also. And make sure you give a like, a share, and a subscribe. Until next time, friends, God bless you.